Hello, welcome to Retro Cheese Review, where I forced my friends and family to watch cheesy movies from my childhood, and we review them. With me is my friend John. John, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I am John.
Yes, this is John. Today, we will be reviewing the movie Honey, We Blew Up the Kid, which for some reason my brain thought was called Honey, We Blew Up the Baby. That's a line in the movie. I think it would have been a better title for the movie, frankly.
Hmm?
So this movie is coming off the wildly successful Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which had, if we go here to, the Rotten Tomatoes score, 76% critics review, 54% audience score. I'm sure when it came out, it was probably, if Rotten Tomatoes existed, it would have been a 100%. Amazing artistic masterpiece, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's hilarious, all joking aside, hilarious, movie. It's Rick Moranis, Canada's greatest gift to the world, probably, and just a great movie. Then they did a sequel,
Mm-hmm.
and like most late '80s transitioning into the '90s, you can see just from this Rotten Tomatoes score, and it's an accurate one. Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. It, none of the magic, all of the none of the budget, but some of the cast. So we got a 40% critic score and a 24% audience score here. The critics were nicer to it than the audience, and probably nicer than they should have been. My retro review of, like, my nostalgia review of this movie, even as a kid, because I loved Honey, We Shrunk the Kids so much, and I was a huge Rick Moranis fan. You know, uh, Even his older, Canadian stuff. I'm trying to remember the movie. Wasn't it Canadian Bacon, or, like, I don't remember. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that was John
No,
Candy.
that was John Candy. I'm trying to remember the one that Rick Moranis was in, where they put the mouse in the bottle. Um,
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name either. And
Either
oh,
way, amazing movie. Rick Moranis is a hilarious guy, and he's a
mhm.
goddamn treasure. But even as a kid, I remember looking at this movie and being like, "Well, this was kind of just okay." So, like, my nostalgia review of it would have been like a 3 out of 5. How about you, John? Like, when you watched it as a kid?
As a kid,
Yes. What did you think of it when you first watched it as a kid? Remembering back to little only 6 foot tall John before you'd reached your full height.
before I was a true giant.
I'm just
Um,
picturing you, at like 8 years old, being like 6 feet tall.
it's funny because this is one of those films that goes in the category that I thought was a fever dream until you mentioned it to me, and I'm like,
Forgot forgot that this movie was ever even made.
yeah, it was like I knew it was there. I had two memories of this film when you mentioned it, and one is Vegas, and two is the kid hates naps.
Yeah,
That's
the kid
all I
hates
remember.
he hates naps.
So, as a child, I probably was in the 3 out of 5 as well. It was a fun film. There was, comedy and the shrink gun and, stuff like that. Yeah, 3 out of 5.
That's a fair review. Yeah, and this movie kind of falls into that because it was a sequel to a late '80s movie.
Hmm.
It was in the early '90s, and there's just this weird time in filmmaking that we didn't know if it was the '80s or '90s. We just couldn't figure it out, and it was like, just movies were so awkward around
Hmm.
then because they started writing the scripts in the late '80s. So this film, oddly enough, stars, we've got an all-star cast. We've got, Rick Moranis. We've got Lloyd Bridges, who's comedic masterpiece, who's completely underused in this movie. Like, Lloyd Bridges from Airplane, and
Hmm.
he says like 4 lines, I think, in the entire movie, and doesn't get a single joke. Like, how do you hire Lloyd Bridges and not give him any jokes?
He had jokes, but he was supposed to be
He was
serious
yeah, yeah. It's like the
while still making humor.
casting Lloyd Bridges in a serious role is
Yeah.
literally like casting Russell Crowe in a musical.
Hmm.
You know what I'm talking about, Les Mis. Um, so it also had Carrie Russell before she learned how to act. And we've
Hmm.
got like a Broadway quality actress, but she's a kid and hasn't figured out how to act yet. I assumed that she got hired to this from nepotism, and then I looked it up and she's not related to Kurt Russell at all. So I'm just like, Kerry Russell, thank God you eventually learned how to act, but you were terrible in this. If you don't know, that's the Rick Moranis's kid in this. His love interest, the babysitter, is Kerry Russell. Yeah. Later went on to do a bunch of crappy 90s shows that I don't remember, that I didn't really watch. And then she's been on Broadway since then, so good for her.
It did not kill her career. That's good.
It didn't kill her career. This is, for her, what Leprechaun was for Jennifer Aniston, I feel like. It just, let's forget that it ever happened, realize that she's a good actress now. And, I don't know if it was the directing or the script, because Rick Moranis just gave it his all, and there wasn't enough of Rick Moranis to save the script.
Because nothing else in this film, besides a few minor jokes and a few fun special effects, is all you had going for this film.
Yeah, and I feel like you didn't even need a budget. Like, if you give Rick Moranis and Lloyd Bridges time, you can make a funny movie. You don't need to work at it. And it's like everything in this movie worked against that. And this coming across, I think that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, hilarious. It's like, it's a classic.
It was a classic. It was funny. It had decent special effects for what it was. Mm-hmm. There were moments of like urgency in that film, like, with him desperately trying to find the kids without crushing him, or giant scorpion trying to murder them, those things.
Yeah, and this was 3 years later, and it's weird because the special effects were far worse than the first movie.
Can you call it a green screen they were using? I don't know what technique.
It's a bad green screen.
Yeah.
And let me just say, I know that kid's like 2 years old. That kid is so goddamn annoying. Like, that entire movie, just repeating everything that everyone says. Let's go with, like, the cute kid, thing, running around, misbehaving. You're a dad, so you might have more of a tolerance than I do, but I hated that child.
I saw that child, and I saw my daughter, who's 2, and I like, yep, there's that, and there's that, and there's that.
This is gonna give me hate, but every time that kid screeched or squealed, I just thought of the last episode of MASH. Just every single time, just shut that damn chicken up.
You in that episode.
It's really horrible. No, I do not condone suffocating children. That was a joke. But I was just very annoyed. There's a reason I'm not a parent. I cannot take the screeching of children, and it just made the movie worse. We also get like the most awkward scene in this movie where the kid just hates naps, and they try to make a joke, and the joke just of like, literally they say, we don't say the N-word around kids. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, it was the 90s. That I was like looking like, did they really just like fucking say that? Yeah. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and just show it. Like,
you don't say the N-word around 2-year-old.
Like, I know that it wasn't meant that way, but that is so damn awkward.
Luckily, they do it really quick.
Yeah, referring to naps as the N-word. It was like, I literally just sat there like this for a minute. Just like, 1992 was a different time, but it wasn't that different of a time.
Luckily, you didn't miss anything during that minute when you had your head down, because half this film you could just black out on and be fine.
Yeah, and kind of diving into the plot. So, we're coming off of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where he invented a shrink ray and accidentally shrunk his kids. This one, he's working for some government lab now, ran by Lloyd Bridges, but his boss is literally like, if you've seen I Think You Should Leave, where there's that whole segment of just describing what a huge piece of shit is. The guy's like an 80s villain, his boss is. He literally is walking hair gel. Like, the guy has so much slick back hair and is just a douche, and he just treats Rick Moranis' character like shit. Like, oh, you're not that smart, and we're trying to do this growth ray. What have you done? It's like the guy just invented a goddamn shrink ray 2 years ago, and you're just talking down to him constantly.
I literally went on a rant with my wife yesterday about that. The fact that, like, Rick, he's coming in, he's got all these notes and everything about how to fix it, make it work, and he's like, I don't need to listen to you, genius.
I hired all these smart people.
Yeah, it would be like, Einstein coming up with the new mathematical, conclusion, and all suddenly people are just like, we don't need to listen to you, Einstein. You might have done all these other good things, but who cares
I mean,
about you now?
it's kind of realistic with history too, with the way that they treated Nikolai Tesla, but
True. But still, it just
it's
drove me nuts. Like, this is a guy that made the company. You would
he,
not be here without him.
he literally invented a shrink ray.
Hmm.
But yeah, the whole thing is that they're working on like the opposite of a shrink ray is the plot, like a growth ray.
They don't
Uh,
explain why.
they don't really explain why, but the company's got like military intentions. We're gonna, I don't know, grow giant super soldiers or something. Um,
It's science in the 90s. Who cares?
yeah, 90s science. Rick Moranis is kooky as usual.
Hmm.
He eventually like breaks into the lab because he's sick of dealing with working around his boss, and he's fixed the growth ray. It accidentally hits his toddler, and hijinks ensue. The kid keeps getting bigger for some reason. They explain it in some weird sciencey shit.
Hmm.
He keeps getting bigger and bigger. The original daughter's there cause not there because she went off to college, but Carrie Russell's there because they had hired a babysitter, and she showed up. They hired her before the growth, and then so his
I,
kid.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love the two nosy neighbors that kept going for walks.
Yeah, one of them's like I think her name's like Julie Sweden or something. I'm getting the name wrong from SNL.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah,
she.
it just they kept same outfit, same two people, constantly going on walks by, and every time they're just like, "Oh, that house."
Yeah, they reminded me of like HOA Karens. Like I
Yes,
think definitely like modern day HOA, housing association Karens, just judging their house. There is a regular kind of comedy routine with them, just being judgy and bitchy about it.
Judgy,
Um,
Snoopy. Yeah,
Yeah. So kid keeps getting bigger. Nick, the other kid, and Carrie Russell, which I didn't bother remembering her actual name. They're trying to slow the kid down, stop him. Then somehow they end up in the kid's pocket, and the kid ends up in Vegas. The mom's back, and they try a lot of stuff, including putting him to sleep. But oh no, he says nap. There's one
hmm,
scene where he's playing. He rips out the Planet or not the Hard Rock Cafe
yes, the
guitar.
guitar.
Um,
That
there
was
is
the
a
best and worst scene of just him, giant kid, pretending to play guitar.
there is a kind of racist scene, and I couldn't find a clip of it. I wanted to play it, in which the kid goes up to a group of Japanese tourists when he's super big, and
Oh yeah,
they yell, "Oh no, Godzilla!" Which in the '90s that was kind of funny. I mean, let's be honest. And that, I mean, Lloyd Bridges showed up, fired the slick back hair dude who for some reason just can't let it go and is trying to fly around in a helicopter. And in
yeah.
the end, they finally solve it, like because the whole thing is getting the kid hold still long enough to use the shrink ray. By they get him by growing the mom, and the mom being like, "Now hold still," because only hold still for mommy, and then it ends with them because they accidentally shrink their kid and Carrie Russell's character, and they're looking for him, and it ends with them finding him, but taking some time because clearly they're having a little bit of a moment because they
Romance.
romance, yeah, teenage
Ooh.
romance. And that's really the plot of the movie.
Hmm.
John, what's your take on it? Anything that I missed?
So this was clearly Disney's attempt to make a giant monster movie without terrifying kids.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But it was a giant monster terrorizing Vegas. And I kept laughing because at one part he finds the neon cowboy and keeps trying to talk to it. And I was like, yep, that's what
Yeah,
my
he's
daughter would do. My
trying
daughter
to
would
play with
totally,
it.
yeah, he kept saying howdy, and you'd be like, howdy. It's like, that's exactly what my kid would do. But just watching a little kid go around what he thought was a toy city.
Yeah, I remember when he gets there, I'm like, oh, it's weird that they're shooting the whole thing in like old Vegas, and my wife had to go to
Hmm.
me, and it's like that was Vegas in the '90s, like because I did not realize like how modern the new strip is. Like what they call old Vegas now was Vegas in the '90s.
And only like two of those casinos still exist today.
I've been to a couple of them that I saw there when Felicia
Yeah.
and I were in Vegas. Yeah, Hard Rock Cafe. I don't think anyone, anyone under 30 is going to even know what the hell that is.
But yeah, I mean, all in all, it was just a bad. Well, there were a couple of fun graphics, a couple of fun jokes, but mostly a bad film that disappointed me from my childhood.
Yeah. Um, yeah, these rewatches sometimes have been a little disappointing. This one I knew. And the worst thing is there's another one that's even worse than this, the Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which, I'm not going to subject John to that. We have a rule that I'm trying to instill in this channel that if there is a worse sequel that it's at least tolerable, we watch the worst sequel. But if there's an even worse third movie, we don't necessarily subject ourselves to that. That rule will come into place when Ninja Turtles, because, Ninja Turtles is amazing. The second one is cheesy as hell. And the third one, we don't talk about.
Nope.
But yeah, I guess my take on it, my review, and I'm not trying to be super negative. My last couple reviews have been a little negative. I've got a lot of very positive ones. It just was not good, even though it had Rick Moranis in it. He just... God bless his soul, he tried.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any justification for him getting punched on the street a couple years ago, it would be this movie. And I wouldn't even say that that's a justification, because everything else he's done... I mean, he was in Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm. And everything else he does is
Yeah.
great and hilarious. It's just,
Yeah,
he was already part of the system. They made one, and they wanted to make a two, and you can't make a two without the mad scientist, so...
Was this... I was going to say Michael Eisner had to have his money, but I don't even know if Eisner was in charge at this point with Disney.
I do not know.
That man had a lot of great ideas and a lot of flops. Eisner. They should bring him back. He'd do a much better job than Iger. Gonna just say it here. Fuck Bob Iger. So yeah, what I would definitely give it, like, with the rewatch, because I gave it a 3 out of 5 before with nostalgia, I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. It's worse rewatching it. I thought it was bad as a kid, and rewatching, I'm like, God, no, so, like, cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest travesty, the biggest crime, is the lack of using Lloyd Bridges for any actual comedy. Because you've got...
He had a couple of moments that were kind of funny, but he was told to be serious.
Yeah, it's 1992 Lloyd Bridges, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like hiring, like, mid-90s Jim Carrey and telling him not to be funny in a comedy movie.
They did that. It didn't turn out well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you rate it, like, the rewatch?
Can I give it a 1.5?
You can give it whatever rating you want.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a 1.5. There were a couple of moments that were entertaining, a couple of graphics that were fun, but there were so many parts, especially the green screen. Every time I could be like, there it is. That's the green screen split right there, and it's just awful. And then the acting around... The kid was having fun. That's the only part of it that really brought me joy, was the kid having fun. But all the people acting to the big kid was dreadful.
So bad, yeah.
A lot of the just script in general was bad.
Yeah, and people rewatching this might just think, well, it's, the graphics are part of its time. They're not. They're really not. Like, Jurassic Park wasn't that much later than this, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of movies that came out after or around the same time or even before this that the graphics are better. It's just... Disney was just like, we need to get a sequel out quick. This was wildly successful. Let's pump one out really quick for a really low budget and just make money.
I'll give one positive thing to this movie. So they didn't just enlarge the child. They also enlarged his stuffed animal.
Yeah.
When that thing is full size and they show it, like, laying on the ground, that is amazing detailed prop.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. That's, like, where most of their money went into that and Lloyd Bridges, I think.
Yeah.
Like, and the underutilization. All right.
I remember, like, I wasn't even paying attention to the movie by the end. I was just like, wow, that prop is cool.
Yeah, this was one of those that it took all my energy not to just go on Facebook and scroll, like, during the movie. Like, I'm done. Just, I did a little bit. But yeah, I think that's really the review of this movie. If you liked this review, please give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, and leave a comment of the next movie that you'd like us to review. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.